Hello, and welcome to the Responder Life with Molly
and Victoria. We are super excited to be joining you today, coming live during the winter time of Winter Storm Enzo.
Enzo, yeah, it is Winter Storm Enzo currently. As I said, my name is Molly. I have 5+ years of emergency management experience, ranging from tornadoes to hurricanes to floods to COVID. Have traveled all over the country doing responses and recovery. And I'm super excited to be here with you tonight. And
I'm Victoria Hess. I am your other co-host, co-founder, co-creator, whatever we're calling the Responder Life, along with Molly. And as of recording this, we did just release our first episode. So shout out to all the real ones who listened to our first episode before we recorded this.
Our second episode, we released that too.
We released it too, but it hasn't been released since we were recording this. The timeline.
No, I haven't.
Yeah. We don't know what people are thinking of our next podcast, where hopefully people like it and it's a bit more smooth as we're getting used to the process of both recording a podcast and, figuring out what it looks like. If you're listening to us and you think it sounds a bit different, that's because we are in different places at the moment. If you're joining us with a video, you can see that we are in different places at the moment. So I'm coming live from my podcast studio, which is also my office and my guest room and podcast studio now, I guess we can call it too.
I'm coming at you from Staybridge Inn and Suites in Columbia, South Carolina.
Yay. But yeah, so glad you guys are joining us anyway, even if whatever time of day it is you're listening to us.
Very true.
So my name is Victoria Hess. I am currently a disaster professional. I would say I fall into the category of humanitarian more so than anything else. I've got some experience both working internationally and domestically, specifically disaster response over the last been over 5 years since I started, which is crazy because I started internationally. But I'm really excited to be a part of the Responder Life with Molly. And I think it's a lot of fun for both of us to have a place to talk about what it is, because this isn't necessarily something you can talk about with your family over, a holiday meal. Sometimes you tell stories and they look at you weird. Ask me how I know.
How do you know?
I tell stories that my family thinks are weird because they don't understand what I talk about.
My parents were here over the weekend and I told them some stories, and their response to pretty much everything is, well, I'm glad you understand that because I don't.
Yeah, I would say, so to preface this, Responder Life is by responders for responders. I think that's the quickest way we can say it. But I told my mom about our podcast the night before it went live because I wanted to, know for sure what I was talking about. And I called her and I was chatting with her, and I can say this story because I don't think she's paying attention to this because of the previous story. If you know my mom or my mom is listening, I'm sorry if I'm embarrassing you, but it's really, really funny. So my mom was paying attention to my story about, what the Responder Life is. And I'm so excited it's coming out. And she was also cooking dinner at the time. I'll give her that. And so I was like, oh, cool. My mom's going to understand what I talked about. I get a call the day after our podcast released because my mom and my sister were watching it on YouTube via video. So if you haven't checked this out on video, I recommend it. It might be a little bit awkward looking, but we're getting used to it. We're figuring it out.
That's part of the fun.
Part of the charm. We're getting used to being charming in that way. But my mom was listening to it and she was like, yeah, my sister, your sister and I, we got it like 3 minutes in and we were like, we don't understand what's going on. Why are you guys introducing yourselves over and over again? Why do people want to listen to you talk about your credentials to work in this field? And they're like, yeah, we got a little bit bored. So we kept hitting fast forward. And they were like, it doesn't talk about what you said you were going to talk about. Turns out they thought that this was a podcast for the general public to learn how to be prepared for disasters.
Now,
maybe we can teach some things, but...
Well, tell your mom that September is Preparedness Month, and our podcasts for the month of February are going to talk about personal
September?
preparedness. Yeah, in September. What is...
You said in the month of February we're going to be talking about preparedness, but oh well.
Well, we're not. I'm so sorry. We are not going to be talking about preparedness in February, although it is important. But we will be dedicating September to preparedness because in order to go and respond, you do have to be prepared at home. We have to take care of ourselves first before we can take care of others. So we will be dedicating those 2 episodes to preparedness.
Or 3, depending on however the month breakouts. We haven't gotten that far.
I have a lot to say about preparedness because I'm often unprepared.
I would agree with that. I'll just say this as my thing for preparedness before we jump into the next thing. So one of the weird things about where I live is I live like 5 minutes away from a nuclear power plant. And so there's a lot of planning that goes involved with nuclear power and what happens if it doesn't work the way we want it to. I've sat in a lot of those meetings, a surprising amount. Did not expect that when I took this job. But I'm like, my plan is I'm going to be working in an EOC somewhere, so I don't need to worry about how ready I am. Now I have a dog, and that is not a good plan, as I have discovered. So I have adjusted that plan accordingly, but
I'm
don't
concerned
have.
if you ever thought that that was a good plan, to be honest.
I realized that after the fact. So it's, you figure it out. Because I mean, me being prepared living in North Carolina versus being back at home where my family's from looks very different for the different types of hazards and like the community network I have, when all my
That's actually
relatives are down the road,
really,
it's
actually a really
different.
good point. Because I grew up in Missouri and, we had tornadoes. The kind of tornadoes, like the sirens go off and everybody goes on their front porch to watch because I
Yeah,
don't know, like, I
that's
guess we
what
just
we
don't
had.
care. We don't have self-respect or something. But, then I moved to Louisiana because I responded to a hurricane. And then I was moved there and it was Hurricane Ida. And I was like, I'm prepared. I know all about storms and I've responded to a hurricane before. This girl did not have any cash. This girl did not understand that she would need cash for everything, that, the internet was going to be down and I couldn't pay for fuel or food, and here I am, this disaster program manager for Red Cross with all of these awesome volunteers who, kind of like adopted me at that point in time. And it was like, everyone knows when Molly doesn't feel good that she needs a can of Sprite. And like, they were all using their own cash to buy me Sprite and put fuel in my vehicle. And it was like, you know, nobody expected anything back from me except for using my story to help other people be prepared. So I love them. Of course, I paid them back. We had all kinds of meals, took them out to eat all the time. We even went to a sports game. I feel awful. It was an LSU game. I took them to an LSU game. And we had so much fun. But, it's true. Like, preparedness is different everywhere, which actually leads into a great topic, which we have for tonight, which is on, so you've got the deployment request. What now? First of all, congratulations for deciding that you want to get involved in disaster, whether you're new, whether you've been volunteering or working in emergency management for a while. Definitely give yourselves a pat on the back for deciding to go out in the field because it is a big step.
Yeah.
So you've registered your availability, you've got that call, hey, it's time to go. There's a lot that happens between getting that phone call and being on the ground. So that's what we wanted to focus on tonight. Just
One
raise your
thing,
hand.
yes, because I want to make sure I don't forget about this. I used to be a teacher, so like it's embedded into who I am at this point, right? What we're talking about in this does not necessarily represent the views of our employers. Not
Yeah.
that this is necessarily related to our specific topic, but just to make that clear that this is our podcast that we're doing as private citizens and does
Yeah.
not necessarily represent the views of our employers, as we are working professionals in the field. And it's important to make that distinction. So people don't get confused if you know us in other venues as to what we're doing.
Also, I'm going to make this as generic as possible because I know everybody has different deployment protocols. So don't take this as gospel. But okay, so you've got the call. What now? I remember my first deployment. My first deployment was actually a virtual one because I didn't think that I could deploy physically, actually, because I have a disability. I thought I would be like banned from deploying, like I'd be too much to handle, which I am, but that's
That's
for
not
other
because of your
reasons.
disability.
No, it's not. It's just because I'm mouthy. I say what I think, but I'm also autistic, so I kind of get away with it. She's laughed. She knows what I'm talking about, too. I just
Because
say
we
what I
also
feel.
deployed together. So I know
We
exactly what you're
do.
talking about. It was only one disaster that we've been deployed on together. So, and it was the first one
Yeah,
where we met.
I'm just really not good at like hiding facial expressions or my true feelings.
Also, just to clarify as well, we do try to maintain neutrality throughout this. We don't want to be political in this, even though disasters can be, they're political in some ways. We want to
We are
make sure that
apolitical,
we are neutral.
neutral, apolitical. So the same thing.
Apolitical. We want to make sure that this is for responders and by responders. There may be some stuff you
Yes.
don't agree with us on, which fair enough. I don't agree with myself on some things. We have great conversations. I have great conversations with myself. It makes me sound a lot more crazy than I am. I promise I'm not that
It
crazy.
really does. It really does. I am politically neutral. I don't like to share my politics because I believe that in serving in a profession that is to serve others, I'm also a reserve police officer when I'm at home. I do not like people associating me with a political party because I think it makes it more difficult for some people to see someone as approachable.
Mhm.
Everyone to be able to approach me without, you know, being able to easily grasp at things that make me different. I think that's important when you help people. So you got your deployment request and, like I said, I was with the Red Cross at the time as I don't remember, I was actually a safety
Biomed, right?
program manager. Yeah, I was a safety program manager in the biomedical field. And I didn't think that they were going to let me because the first thing Red Cross does actually is they actually do, I used to do this for them too, as a pre assessment
Health
health
questionnaire.
pre-health questionnaire where they would call you and they would, I actually love this. I wish that everybody would do this, to be honest. They would call and they would talk about the different adverse things that were going on the disaster, like lack of access to healthcare, fresh water, everything. They would go over that and they would ask you a few very generic questions that really wouldn't get into your diagnosis or any medical stuff, but it would be, they would, ask if you'd had anything recent, if you'd been hospitalized recently, if you'd had a new diagnosis recently, and I just opened up. I said, look, I have an ostomy. I said, I just had surgery to switch to a different kind of ostomy. So I already know how to take care of it. And I'm doing really, really good. And, I feel confident that, I know how to troubleshoot things and that I would be in the okay in the field. And I wish I remembered this disaster health person's name because she said the kindest thing I had ever heard. She said to me, she said, I would imagine that you have a lot more freedom now that you have an ostomy and you're symptomatic. And
I just got chills literally
I
hearing
know,
that.
like, I cried on the phone with this lady. I was like, "You're the first person who understands." So I was able to deploy. I was very stressed about that phone call. I've never deployed with anyone else who has that phone call, but to me, it's like you do this, kind of assessment of yourself and also like helps you have a conversation about maybe some reasonable accommodations that you would need, but also like navigating different adverse types of conditions that you may be working in. Because of my medical condition, I have the heat tolerance of a 2012 laptop. And,
She made this word joke earlier, but it's so funny. I think it's going to get me every time I hear this, even when I'm editing. I think I'm going to be like
but
dying.
it's true though. Like, me, like I literally can't walk outside in the heat.
And you do
Actually,
overheat very easily. You don't have good
I do.
circulation of
No,
fluid.
not at all. Not at all. So I have to look at the environment, and this worksheet will help you like kind of look at like the weather in that area and what's going on. For me, I have some things I have to do for weather and how I pack them and how I do that, or now I just ship them to Victoria's place
Yeah,
because
that's
I
because
can
I'm
go.
closer to you than probably we've
Yes,
ever been long term.
I know.
It's
Um,
incredibly great.
It is great. But this sheet will help you like walk through asking yourself if you're truly ready to go. And then once you've determined that you are or you aren't, it's okay if you are. If you decide you're not ready, that's okay. There are definitely virtual options and I really kind of enjoyed the virtual options. But once you do decide that you're ready, now you got to pack and get ready.
Oh, yeah.
That's the hard part.
I would say too, as you're looking at it, it's not just like physical health. Well, that's really, really important. It's also your mental health. If you are not mentally able to be present and you're not going to be able to deal with the disaster, especially depending on what stage of the disaster. If you're going to one that's a mass casualty incident where there's been multiple deaths and you're going to be working with people very directly, and maybe, for example, you had a loved one die recently, maybe this is not the right time for you to deploy to this kind of a disaster. Not necessarily a disaster in general. Maybe you do need to get away and get your mind off of things and help people, but being selective in kind of the what opportunities you're looking at is very important
This
as
is
well.
not a good distraction to get away from like other
No,
things. Like, oh, were you
no.
with me that time when I that I was on a deployment and like a married couple deployed together.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And they were like on the brink of like filing for divorce. So they thought that they would deploy and volunteer at a disaster together to save their marriage. Like, I don't know.
That didn't work,
Um,
right?
I don't know.
I don't
But
recommend it for sure.
disasters are high stress situations. So I can't believe, I can't believe that they did that, but I can't imagine like deploying with someone I'm not getting along with and then putting myself in a high stress situation with them and trying to like, I don't know, like, I
Yeah.
feel like that's like one step worse than trying to have a baby to save your marriage. I don't know. Like, I'd rather have that baby than deploy with
Then the
somebody
child has
that
to
I'm
deal
not.
with this.
Yeah, but then you're birthing another disaster responder for the future.
That's one way of looking at it for sure.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was, don't do that. Don't be that couple.
Don't be that. Don't be the, I would say one of the key things in disaster response is when you're talking with someone, especially after you've been out a couple of times, if they aren't on the disaster, you can be like, oh, this person is just one of those people. And people know exactly what you're talking about. You don't want to be the people who, they go, this person,
Yeah, don't be
they
that
weren't one of
person.
those. And typically, maybe it's just an off day, but that's why you want to make sure you're deploying at the right time and you've got your mental health stuff in order. Also, if you've got chronic mental health conditions, keeping that in mind. If you take medication or anything like that, making sure you've got that on
Don't stop
hand.
taking your medication in the middle
No.
of deployment. And make sure you have access to it on a deployment.
Yes.
We'll link it on our website
Mhm.
actually. I ended up not being able to give the presentation because I was in the hospital, but my doctor actually did it. We did a presentation on um, using my chart to be able to take your treatment anywhere else that you go and utilizing that as a
That's
resource
so
to
cool.
fill prescriptions. And actually, it's a video. It's on YouTube. And
We'll
actually,
definitely link to that.
she uses me as a case study. So you'll probably know more about me at the end of that video than you ever wanted to. But
I mean, yeah.
it's a really, really good place because, you click share everywhere in there. And no matter where you go to the doctor, as long as they use Epic Records, they can see all of your medical stuff and help get you the prescriptions that you need without having to like redo tests or anything like that. So it's really beneficial.
It's super, super cool. And I
And
would say,
Victoria, there's another resource that you got me hooked to, if
oh,
you want to tell
yes,
everyone about
that's,
that.
that's kind of what I was leading into. So one of the other things that I do to keep myself sane every Monday night, I have therapy online with my therapist, who I've actually been with for like 5 years at this point, virtually. I have lived in multiple countries and multiple states, and I've kept the same therapist. And I talk to her even when I'm deployed. I highly recommend it. I use BetterHelp. They are not a sponsor of this video, but if you're BetterHelp and you're interested in sponsoring, hit me up.
We would love to be connected with BetterHelp.
Yeah.
And Victoria hooked me up with BetterHelp. I've been using it for years now.
Yeah.
Definitely on
I refer
deployment.
so many of my friends to BetterHelp all the time, especially who work in the responder field.
And my favorite feature is that you can email back and forth with your therapist, even, you know, when you're not having a session. It doesn't cost any more. But there have been several deployments. I did a border ops deployment and it was horrific for me. And I was pretty much messaging back and forth on BetterHelp like it was text messaging with my
I mean,
therapist during that.
yeah.
So it's really a great option. It's virtual. You can do it anywhere.
Yeah. And if you don't have BetterHelp and you do have a regular therapist, you can definitely talk to them and be like, hey, I'm going to be deployed. Can I do a virtual session? It might be a little bit more, finagling there, but I would say definitely look into that and you can like maybe move it around and do it on your day off. But continuing to have what supports you can in place as you're dealing with situations that are complex and changing. I know when I've been deployed and I haven't had my access to therapy, I can definitely tell. But there's also resources when you're deployed for mental health resources for support. But if you've got that connection that you want to keep stable, having those pieces to keep you stable is definitely really helpful.
I have always recommended making friends with all of the mental health people who are deployed to a disaster.
Yep.
Still really good friends with a lot of them from Red Cross. Um, but there are mental health people that are deployed with a lot of organizations, and they're great resource too. I would even be like, hey, you want to go eat dinner tonight? And we go out to eat, kind of de-stress, talk about our days, and it's really nice. I mean, that's
Yeah.
another great thing to do, make friends. You
For
know,
sure.
I went
For
to
sure.
a training. I went to a training like earlier, I want to say earlier this year, but it's 2025 now. It was last year I went to a training, it was a week-long training, and my mom called me on the first night and she was like, oh, did you make any friends? And I'm like, I'm not here to make friends, Mom. I'm here to get trained. But that being said, I did make friends because it is very important we call them trauma bonds. It,
Yeah.
it really is a trauma bond, let's be real, because you can spend 2 weeks, 30 days deployed with someone and become closer to them than someone that you grew up with just because of the shared trauma. So just, know when to say, hey, I need to talk to somebody, and know it's time to kick it up a notch to get, professional help, and don't be ashamed to. I mean, it's not a weakness. Part of ending the stigma is talking about it. And, we're also, here to encourage other people that are deploying to seek therapy. And the more you normalize it, the more people will seek it.
I'll say I've got two stories along that line too. I was at a meeting, an LEPC meeting. If you've ever been to one of those, you know what I'm talking about.
So what's an LEPC meeting? I've never
A
heard of that.
local emergency planning committee meeting, and basically every county in the country should be having one of those so you can get access to different sorts of funding from the government and make sure that hazardous materials are secured appropriately, because the last thing anybody wants is an explosion or some sort of other toxic waste incident because things aren't getting stored appropriately.
It also allows like plants and like different organizations that do different things to collaborate. If there was a disaster in the community, they do a lot of community exercises involving like if you have a hazardous material, like we have a lot of chemicals in Louisiana down on Cancer Alley. And if one of them has a plant, it really is called Cancer Alley. I didn't make that
I'm
up.
surprised to hear that, but not surprised at the same time.
It's Cancer Alley. Like I
Mhm.
don't drink water. But like if there's an explosion, they are going to exercise what their response is going to be. They're going to bring in their local Red Cross and do a sheltering exercise. They're going to bring in fire. They're going to bring in the hazmat people. They're going to
Mhm.
play it out, or they'll do like
Yeah.
call it a tabletop exercise, or where they just talk their way through it to determine, where can we improve this plan. So they're very, very important for the community. See, so I
But
didn't know what it was. I just want
yes,
everyone.
you did. It's good to explain that stuff and get rid of all of the acronyms that exist in this field where we can. But, a hot topic at mine is a lot of nuclear stuff, because in my geography, especially in the counties I'm thinking of, there's 2 different nuclear plants within the radius for like getting graded by FEMA for exercises. So we talk a lot about nuclear stuff, which I
What's
never
FEMA?
expected. What? FEMA?
What's FEMA? I'm going to call you out on every acronym. So if you get nothing else out of this podcast, you will learn your acronyms and we'll explain all of them to you.
Why don't you
So
tell me the acronym of FEMA, Molly?
I don't know it. I really don't know what FEMA is. Can you tell me?
Federal Emergency Management Agency, right?
And what I suppose, what do they do?
They're the feds. They do fed
Okay,
stuff.
but like what role do the feds play
Why
in
am I on
disaster?
a pop quiz here? Why don't you tell me
Because
what feds
you
pay?
that's just the acronym. This is a game that we're gonna start
I
playing.
don't
It's
like this
called
game unless
it's
I
called
can.
if you use an acronym, you then have to explain it. So I didn't use the acronym. So what do
Here,
the feds do on an emergent for a disaster?
I'll say the feds aren't involved in everything. FEMA doesn't come in for, a little bitty incident. They come in when it's a large escalating incident, like I'm trying to think of what kind of scale it gets called in. But basically things go off of damage and the property damage value in order to get state declarations. And then once it has sufficient damage, it goes up to a federal declaration.
But I want to make clear because I know that there's confusion, especially in
Yeah.
Louisiana. We've had some very small tornadoes
Mhm.
that did not get a declaration. But
Yeah.
and I think people confuse this a lot that
Yeah.
just because there's not a federal declaration does not mean that you're getting assistance.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah.
it has to meet a damage threshold where the state can't handle helping
Yeah.
the people.
Yeah.
So you're still getting help. You don't need a declaration to get help. There's still help available to you.
Yes. And we did have a small disaster where everybody was like, why isn't FEMA coming? But they rarely got a state declaration. But, as you're working with local officials and they're advocating and sending in applications, it's a lot of legal bureaucracy and other things assigned with it. So it's a lot more complicated than, I necessarily can explain, but I think it's definitely something we can talk about in future episode, like the kind of times when maybe a federal disaster gets declared.
I sort of understand when, but not really.
We can do some deep dives research into that one to give a good.
We can write a song, so it'll be like when a bill becomes a law.
No, we're not going to do that.
Why? I really want to.
We could do that, but that might be a bit much for us to do with everything else.
Why? My dad could write it. My dad's a songwriter.
Okay. Well, we'll see. We'll see what that looks like. Anyway, back to my story before I started defining all of these organizations. Basically, I was in an local emergency planning committee meeting, LEPC meeting, and there was a power company there, and they were talking about how after Helene, they actually brought in mental health counselors to the bases where all of the linemen were because everybody was seeing quite traumatic things as they were going out in the field to restore power. And they'd never done that to bring in mental health counselors. And it was really, really impactful for the people who were, being supported because they were like, I can't do this. But, you don't necessarily think about power companies bringing in.
Say that I love that. I have not heard about that.
I know. I heard about it and I was like, this is so cool.
Okay, but like those are like manly men. Like
they
literally like lumberjacks. Like they have those like things where they like climb the poles. No, those are like men. Like those are men with hair on their back. Like they don't use therapists. Like I'm like no. But no, like
they were
so
using
the fact
them.
that they brought them in and that they used them, I cannot believe that this was amplified to like a national media level. These are the stories that people need to be hearing.
And I would say
Oh my gosh.
yeah, and I would say the other thing that was super cool when I was in that room, and it was a different conversation. I had one of the partners that I work with regularly who works with one of my counties. After Helene, I kind of did a brief out during a meeting, and afterward he came up to me and was like, hey, are you getting mental health support? And really wanted to make sure I was getting connected with counseling. It was the very, very kind thing for him to do. And if you're ever listening to this, you know who you are. I don't want to give you a shout out. And he was like, I wish I would have gotten support with my mental health earlier because it has damaged so many different things by not having that earlier. You see a lot of things out in the field, especially if you're working as in emergency management. There's a lot more things than maybe if you're in a voluntary role or anything like that. As we all do different roles, you see different things. And he was like, yeah, it's been really helpful for me. So I want to make sure you're getting that support. So
I actually used a stress counselor at work this week, and I wasn't gonna like tell anybody the story because it's kind of silly. But so everyone knows I have a service dog. I was gonna show him on camera tonight, but he's asleep on the couch.
good for him. You wish you were there.
But so my boss was like bringing him like lunch every day, being like beef jerky and cheese. And so he was like just feeding him this like throughout the day. And I went to pick up some things that I printed on the printer, which was like right outside the chief of staff's office. And I didn't notice this, but Charles had diarrhea right outside the door of the chief of staff. I did not know this. Otherwise, I would have done something about it like immediately before anyone noticed. But like I went back to my desk and she like came out and she's like, there's poop in front of my door. I really wanted to be like smart about it, but I wanted to be like, are you sure it's Charles? Are you sure somebody else didn't like come poop? And also there's like two other service dogs, but they're on different floors. But I'm like, how do we know like Charles? I did not. Like, I didn't say that. I really wanted to because I was really upset about it. And I was like, mostly, I was like embarrassed, right? Like, he's a service dog. He's supposed to be really good. So like,
he's in training a little bit, right? Like, he's in continual improvement process.
I think every service dog is in a continual improvement process. Like, and But he's not working on his pottying skills. I think it was clearly he had diarrhea. And he did not know what was going to happen.
Yeah.
So like I cleaned it up, and then she like came over and she told me that like service dogs were so well trained that like they don't have accidents. And and I got upset, which I was like, sometimes I poop in my pants.
You
You ever
can't do that
sharted?
anymore, though.
No, well, no, I can't. But like people shart, like it happens. No matter how long you potty train, you know. I wanted to say that. I wanted to ask if she had ever sharted, and but like thankfully, I mean,
Hmm.
Charles isn't gonna do it again because I'm gonna take Charles outside every 2 hours to make sure if he has diarrhea, he does it in an appropriate place. My boss, shout out Mitchell, is no longer feeding Charles. So Charles, unfortunately, is now on a diet that consists of kibble, dry kibble, and that is all that he's getting because I'm not getting my service dog kicked out of the office for pooping on everything. But I did have to go see the stress counselor because I was very upset and I didn't know how to handle it because it was the first time my service dog had done anything. And I was stressed. I was like, because I was ready to go home. I was going to go home over this. I was going to undemobilize and go home and never demobilize again was what it was in my mind. And I went down to the stress counselor and I said, I'm going home and I'm never coming back. And she was like, so that's a bit dramatic. Why don't we talk it through? And we did. We had a nice long conversation. And by the end, I was like, dog had an accident. It happens. And we'll just work through it. Wasn't his fault. And, I'd probably be upset too if somebody pooped outside of my house, especially if I had luckily she didn't step in it. But I would have been next level if I had stepped in the poop.
Well, for sure.
So
I get
still
mad
not
if that's
really,
my dog in my house. Like,
well, I
if she
know,
has an
but
accident like that.
still not sure it was Charles that pooped though. He pooped in that office.
I'm sorry, that's so funny. But anywho, making sure your mental health is in order before you deploy and you have structures in place to make sure you are taking care of yourself after you deploy. Super, super, super important.
100%.
Especially because you're not going to be around, your typical people unless you're not being a codependent, negative way deploying with your spouse. Like, maybe in a healthy way you're deploying with your spouse because you're both disaster nerds and you like to go and do that as your
Trade
hobby.
numbers with your disaster friends.
What?
Send memes.
Yeah.
I said, well, you're not going to be around each other, but you're still going to have these thoughts going in your head. Trade numbers.
Yep.
Text memes. I like memes.
Yep. Yep.
Or
That's
you
why
at 1 o'clock in the morning sending
Yeah.
me TikTok videos when I'm trying to sleep.
I mean, I used to do that at least, but I would say that, that's kind of why also too why we created the responder life. So there is a space that people know that they can come to and create like these weird stories that happen or, questions that pop up. Like there is not that many places to talk about, making sure you are actually ready to be deploying or how to get access to supports you need or even if we aren't necessarily familiar with the organization you're deploying with, that doesn't necessarily mean you don't have a supervisor that you've been assigned when you get there to be asking these questions to, because you should not be doing a job you don't know how to do. Straight up. If you don't know how to do the job and it's your first time or you don't know who to talk to learn how to do the job, ask up. And if people don't give you, you may not like the answer you get necessarily of what your job is because it wasn't necessarily what you expected. But if you do not know what your job is, look in the incident action plan probably is going to be somewhere. There's going to be somebody you can talk to. I'm catching these acronyms early.
I thought you were going to say look in the IAP and
it was so difficult not to just say IAP, but keeping an eye on those kinds of things. And as you understand what the situation looks like, if you're doing your organization does a very limited scope, it might be easier to know all of that information. If you just do a kitchen and you're going to be peeling potatoes for the entire time, you're going to be peeling potatoes. Hopefully it's not that complicated.
Or painting on rebuilds. That's literally my favorite. I do not need directions to do.
I might need to know where the paint is and, are we using rollers? Or are we using brushes or something like that? But I also don't paint all the time houses on the regular.
I mean, I don't either, but I have deployed to do that and I loved it.
I have not, but it definitely sounds really rewarding to just
and the best part,
product that you've done on a wall.
And
around
the
a
best part
building.
was at the end, we all signed each other's paintbrushes.
Aww.
Yeah, so like it's in like a shadow box, like at my house. Yeah, because it's cool. We all
Yeah.
signed each because we worked as a team. We were like,
That's
this
so
is
sweet.
I
It's
know.
always nice when you can have like these like heartwarming like odds and ends like from a deployment. Like you really can meet some incredible people because a lot of the people who choose to deploy, and I hope that that's the people who are listening or people who support people who deploy or are responders, because to be a responder, you don't have to deploy. There are lots of things you can do in your communities to support disaster because disaster happens in different scales and scopes all the time.
And not to be religious, but I thought it was really cool at church last week. I think it was last week where, we collectively at a church sang super loud and prayed. Like the pastor said, sing this song as loud as you can to lift up the people in the fire who, are losing everything, really going through it right now. Sing so loud that they can hear it out there. So it's not, just virtual on the ground, donating money, like prayer, all of that is something that is still getting involved.
Good thoughts, good vibes, you know, words of encouragement, so big. If you are deployed and, it's going to be a rough one and you have somebody who randomly texts you out of the blue saying, I'm so proud of you. Oh my goodness. If I was deployed and I got that text, I'd be like, I hope I'm actually doing something you're proud of, but I think I am. But like those kinds of words of encouragement can mean so much, and having that kind of, background.
I'm laughing because during Helene, my mom texted me, and it wasn't to say she was proud. It was to talk about an article she read saying that you weren't doing anything. Like, maybe not a good time. We can talk this later.
My family knew not to ask me that because they would not have
Oh, no,
gotten a
my
very
mom asked.
kind response.
No, my mom asked. And she didn't mean anything by it. She was just like, why are they saying this? Like, I thought you were working like 15 hours a day. I was like, damn, I very much am. But so I know she didn't mean it like that. She was just curious. She wanted to have a conversation about what was going on. And that was to her a good icebreaker. To me, it was not. Um, I don't take it.
Anybody who's like listening, if you're sending somebody who's deployed a nice thing, don't send them something that says, are you actually doing your job in the media? So,
I was.
yeah.
And then I had my picture taken and it was featured like on our, like an inner thing, like the exchange, like
The inter-networks thing.
the inner network. I'm a safety officer and I was wearing a safety vest, but the person next to me was not wearing one.
Mm-hmm.
And like my boss sent it to me and he was like, so why is she not wearing a vest? And I was like, well, in the picture you can see that we're talking and I'm actually telling her to put a vest on. And I was like,
Incredible.
I didn't even know anyone was taking a picture. I would have like I would have pushed her to get out of the frame. But no, I was like, just say nice things.
Saying nice things to people. Like, and then, I always love like the sweet little nice things people can do, like a handwritten card, just a little thinking of you thing. I die for that.
I like snacks.
Snacks are a little bit less reliable because, unless it's
I
like
still like.
yeah. Okay.
I mean, I don't want something that's home cooked, but like if you're down to invite me to your house for a home cooked meal, I will tell you that is what I miss the most when I'm gone.
Yep. But yeah,
when I go home, my husband cooks like really, really high calorie homemade meals for like the entire week I'm home.
it's so good.
Gumbo.
I need to come and visit and get some good gumbo. I have been craving gumbo for.
You have to come eat some gumbo, and no one makes it like my husband does.
Note.
And I know that because he doesn't like anything that I cook. So he's like, how about you stay out of the kitchen?
I mean, there are worse things.
Don't have to tell me twice. I can't reach half the shelves in there anyway.
But anywho, so we
missed like the most important thing that this podcast is supposed to touch on.
So you're ready to go. It's the right time. You got your orders. You're like, okay, we're going to get going. We're going to go out in the field and it's going to be a great time. So how do we get ready to go, Molly?
Packing is the worst.
Amen to that.
So I've gone through like multiple suitcase sets, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I was very, very disappointed at each organization that I have deployed with when I looked at their resources for people who are deploying because nobody provides an accurate packing list. But
Or it's
you know
so
what?
generic that like it's
We have changed the conversation on that because you know what? Check out our website because there are actually accurate packing lists.
and we might even have some different ones for different types of disasters. Because if you're going to a
Yes.
winter storm, you don't bring your flip flops unless you're
No.
maybe for a shower, but like
And do you know where you can get the best winter gear from?
where?
Canada.
Canada?
Yeah, some of we do have an Amazon storefront.
Amazon. I thought you said Canada.
I did say Canada. Canada has the best cold weather gear. So does Alaska. And found some of it on Amazon, but we have a link tree on all of our social media that has different sites. So everything that we use is linked on there. It's on our Amazon storefront, or we actually have the website linked. And then we have created accurate packing lists. If you're like me and you spend your year on the road, you might want to take advantage of some of the more expensive things that I have on there because they're built to last and they are built for extensive times out in the elements. It's also some really, really good cheap stuff on there from Amazon too. It's not cheap, it's affordable, but everything that is on our links and on our Amazon storefront is stuff that we actually use. So we do know that it works and we do know that it lasts. But we wanted to make sure everyone had access. And I just, what's really important to me to get across is please, please, please do not wait for someone to provide it to you. I mean, I know that like as a volunteer, sometimes things are provided, but like no matter who you work for or volunteer with, you are expected to show up with what you need based on the weather conditions there. So make sure that you don't get somewhere and then all of a sudden get caught with, well, I don't have this and you can't find it there because so many people are responding and they're from all over the country and all of a sudden they need that too. The survivors need to replace it, and you're stuck in a situation where you can't buy it there. So try to make sure that you have a little bit of everything. Pack for the conditions. That's one of the things that our preparedness health thing goes through as well. Is it does talk again about weather conditions there, and making sure that you've talked through everything that you will need for that with yourself before you. So enjoy those resources. If you look on our site and you see something that we haven't covered in our packing lists, or if we don't have a packing list for a certain thing, let us know. You guys can collaborate on these lists with us because we will post them. It's called the edits that will be on there, and the edits will link to Amazon. Everything will be on there. So if there's a list that you think that we should have, please let us know. Please contribute. If you're using something and you think it's great and you think the rest of us should know about it, please let us know because I know that I don't have the best stuff. I'm trying. It's a process.
I'll say most of my stuff is stuff I got when I was living internationally and traveling hardcore all the time. Some of my recs are more stuff that has lasted me between deployments, international living, and like that kind of thing. So maybe not as disaster focused, but I have my backpack. I have gotten a warranty replacement for it, but I have been using this thing until like I got the warranty replacement like earlier in 2024, 2017. I put 7 years into this backpack of using it all the time and traveling. And so, there's a lot of great stuff out there. And also you can find a lot of this if you're not sure where to find it. You can also go to our website at theresponderlife.org. And there's also an opportunity for you to send us a note on that website if you've got anything you think we need to be mentioning, whether it's on the podcast or otherwise. If you are not a social media person, it's not just on social media, it's also on our website.
And you can put questions in there too. And we always at the end will be answering questions live when we do have questions. But we want to make sure everyone's prepared. Please help us in preparing others. We look forward to always continuing the topic of deployment preparedness and building, more confident, more prepared, more disaster ready work.
That's literally why we made the responder life. And it's not necessarily if
Good.
you're going to a disaster, if you are, somehow in another type of response situation, it's still something that might be of use to you as, we're all working in crises of different types.
That's true. And we talked on our first podcast about who is a disaster responder.
Or who is a responder, not necessarily a disaster. Who's a responder?
I'm a little bit of both.
Yeah.
But
sometimes you're the disaster, sometimes you're the responder, right?
That's true. Yes. Jesus.
Glad to know I got you that hard.
Just
zinger.
You're just trying to kill me. But you know what?
You've been trying to kill me too.
I'm not a lineman. I'm not an EMT. Well, I am an EMT, just not on a disaster. But like, I have not responded in every capacity, so I can't possibly build you a list for every capacity. So if you are a truck driver that's driving supplies out to disasters, if you're a lineman, if you respond in any capacity, like, we need help building these lists. So,
or if you work internationally, if you're deploying internationally, like I've got some friends who do international deployments to things, sometimes people are working with refugees, sometimes they're working in, environments where you need basically to build out sanitation systems. So it's a very different context than, maybe sleeping in a gymnasium with 600 of your closest friends that you've never met before.
Sounds awful. But I've done it, though. I have done it.
Yeah. But there's a lot of different ways you can be a responder. We want to make sure that we have our community open to a lot of them, because too, if you're, deploying internationally or you're working in the international space, it's a different ballgame because you've got a lot of paperwork you got to get in order too. Part of the reason why I don't live internationally is because I hate the paperwork so much.
And part of having the community share their experiences is also going to, inspire new responders, or let a responder who's always been doing one thing, they're going to be inspired to try something different. I'm probably not going to try climbing poles and restoring electric.
I would love to actually see that happen, because it would be really entertaining for about 5 minutes, because then you would hurt yourself.
Okay, I'll tell you what. When we get 1,000 followers.
On what?
When we have 1,000 followers on our
Spotify
podcast?
Let's do Spotify.
Okay. When we get 1,000 followers on Spotify, I will go to community college by my school. They actually teach linemen, and I will learn how to climb the pole.
I love this idea. I
want followers, but I want listeners. I want people to listen to the podcast. Mm-hmm. But I'm scared of heights. So y'all just know I'm taking one for the team here.
I hate heights, but I've been forced to deal with them because I grew up on a farm, and so I had to climb machinery. So I
worked in the mining industry before I got into disaster, and I worked underground mines to avoid heights.
My dad fell off of a grain bin, so I try to avoid heights that aren't secured appropriately. And I don't think my dad still secures himself appropriately to grain bins, but you can't tell farmers what to do because they aren't going to listen.
The safety professional in me is horrified, because I did study agricultural safety, and that's like some grain bins are dangerous.
I had a cousin die in a grain bin. Like, it's legit real. My dad was in the ICU for a week because of this grain bin that he fell off of 20 feet headfirst into concrete. That's why you can't taste or smell it. Well, he didn't know what would happen when he got COVID. We can
save a lot of people if we stop eating grain.
I don't think it works that way.
No, just stop eating your quinoa. Like, put it down.
Well, it's grown in the U.S.
It is a grain, all right.
It is a grain, but it's not grown in the U.S. But frankly,
stop eating wheat. Let's put bunny bread out of business. I hate bunny bread.
I think this is so hard, but yeah.
But no, we want to inspire people to deploy in different capacities. You don't always have to do the same thing.
Yeah, we want people to be responders, first of all, and we want them to, I would say my biggest goal with this this whole endeavor is to make sure people have connections. If you want to respond, you're able to, in the capacity you're able to, and that we're able to support each other, because this job is not going to be getting any easier. No, there's more disasters. There's more conflict. There's more this, there's more that. The need is growing, and I don't think it's going to stop growing for a long time, especially because it's hard and people get burnt out and they need to take a break.
Snowing in Florida this week.
Snowing in
The
Florida.
last time that happened was like 1946.
You did a lot of research on the snow that I did not do.
Jim Tour is in Houston, and it's snowing.
And it's not for a hurricane.
No, but he has some really nice looking winter gear on.
Sure, they pay him well, and they probably provide it for him.
Probably. It's Carhartt. It's really good stuff.
Yeah, I'm familiar, as per growing up on a farm.
Every farmer knows what Carhartt is.
Unless you're the child who outgrows it, so then you get the knockoff Carhartt from the
King. Walmart walls?
No. It's not the Walmart. It's the Rural King version, because that's cheaper.
First of all, I love Rural King. Yeah. I will go Rural King before I go to Tractor Supply any day.
Oh yeah, for sure. You get popcorn.
I know.
Popcorn
and
is
those
so good.
Knockoff Carhartts are super warm too.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've been.
The kids didn't want them
Carhartts
because it was like hand-me-down kind of thing.
Yeah. Anywho, I think we've talked a lot about is it the right time to deploy? Are you ready? We've got our packing list that you can access, and we'll definitely be talking more about how are you going to get ready to deploy. And if you've got ideas, share them with us. We love ideas. I tell my team I love ideas. I don't care where they come from. A good idea is a good idea. So share your good ideas. And if you've got one and we want to feature it on the pod, we will give you credit. So you can definitely leave those in comments or in.
And just remember, at one point in time, somebody thought Sharknado was a good idea, and a lot of people agreed. And it's a movie now. I think they've made sequels too.
I've never seen that movie or any of its sequels. But I also don't really watch movies. So
we're going to have a Megalodon Sharknado weekend.
I mean, maybe when you come and hang out with me next. But yes, before we close, we didn't have a chance to put up any Q&A session, we didn't have a chance to get anything to Q's to A. So, because we're recording this about a few days after we posted our first podcast. So we're going to each ask each other a question really quick as a Q&A before we break out and we close things up, because, I think that it's important that we keep that structure, and also we might have some good questions for us to answer. What's your Q to A?
I didn't think of.
You're the one who did this to me last time.
Why is this so hard? If you could deploy in a different capacity than you typically do now, something that you've never deployed in that role before, what would you do?
Great question. I've deployed in a lot of things.
I know, but there's like as many things as you deployed in. There's like 10 million more.
Trying to think. Definitely not in workforce. I don't want to do workforce. I know my strengths and I know my weaknesses, and I don't think it would be a good fit for me. I would say I would probably enjoy public affairs. Not done public affairs, but I feel like I would like it. Either that or, honestly, maybe even like working in a warehouse, getting to move things. That would be very much a 2-week deployment, not anything longer, but like just doing something where I can no, I've never deployed in DES. I would say probably doing DES or doing,
what is DES?
DES is distribution of emergency supplies. So either public affairs or DES or distribution of emergency supplies, I would say would be my 2 I would think about doing. How about you?
Very cool. Honestly, I'm a huge fan of Operation Blue Roof with the Army Corps of Engineers. I know that you have to be an Army Corps of Engineer person to do that.
Okay. I guess I didn't think about going in other organizations.
Yeah. I mean, I just, living in Louisiana, there's still blue tarps everywhere. So it's just kind of like a familiar scene to me. But I would like to learn how the tarps work. I'd like to learn how to put one on. Yeah, I think I'd want to deploy with Operation Blue Roof.
I'll say for my question is, dang, now I have to remember my own. I was too busy thinking.
You've had all week to think of it.
I did have some time. I'm going to say, what is your most underrated thing to bring with you on a deployment?
My most underrated thing that I bring with, I have wish I was close enough so I could grab it. It's a like compact that folds down, and they are shoe dryers.
Interesting.
Like you stick them in your tennis shoes or whatever shoes you're wearing, like if you got them wet out in the field. I did do a deployment where I was out on a staging yard and I got my shoes wet because it was raining. We work in the rain. I didn't have rain boots, anything like that. And my shoes got wet frequently. And my supervisor there was always like on me about, you need to have waterproof shoes. You're going to get your shoes wet. You're going to get your feet wet and you're going to get sick. So after that deployment, I did buy like a tiny, and it like folds down like this small. And it goes in each shoe, and it's a shoe dryer. And I've used it a couple times after being out in the rain, and it's phenomenal.
Yeah, I use shoes that are
waterproof.
waterproof.
Pack less shoes. Lets me pack less shoes.
I wear, I wear shoes that are actually waterproof sneakers. I love them so much. But for me, I'll show you the brand later. But for me, I would say the most underrated thing is I brought basically a headband that also functions as headphones with me on a deployment, because I need to have like a night meditation or something else that helps me fall asleep. And so it's like a headband, so it can like cancel out the noise. The
buttons right up here.
Yeah. So I really liked that, especially if you're like around other people. Like super great, especially because on that deployment, I was in a trailer that had 7 other people on bunk beds. I'll share a picture of that. We'll share a picture of that on social media of my bunk.
I also use that on planes too, because like a long flight, I don't like to have my AirPods in. It'll hurt my ears after a while. So I use the headband. I really like mine.
Yeah, I like using my AirPods because then I can do noise canceling and completely ignore the world while I read my book.
So also, sleeping in like a dormitory setting with everybody snoring is a hard pass for me.
I need to sleep at night to be a nice person. My mother will attest that if I don't get sleep, I am not my kindest, nicest person. So I sleep.
Sleep and coffee.
Yes, Molly can attest as well that I'm a lot nicer after I've had some sleep and I've had some caffeine.
She's like less of a morning person than I am, and I didn't think that was possible.
I think I'm one of the least morning people in existence. I hate morning with a passion.
She has this look on her face when she gets up in the morning, like she just wants to like kill you. So
I didn't know it was that bad.
It's that bad. It's like as bad. She also has this like dog toy for her dog that looks like a sword, and like my dog will run around with it in its mouth looking like it wants to stab everyone, and that's like Victoria when she gets out of bed in the morning.
I'm actually not too surprised by that because I'm not a morning person. And I'm okay with that, and I own it. I'm not going to be a person who wakes up at 4:30 in the morning and goes and does a workout before getting the day going at 6. No, if I become that person, check me into a psychiatrist. Check me into a psych ward. Like straight up. If I'm waking up at 4:30 in the morning to go to the gym and then like be very proactive for my day, I need to be seen by a professional. Like if that's a regular habit. I mean, if you have children or something like that, I think that might make a difference for like early starts. But like, I don't have them. I have a dog. And she lets me sleep in as late as I want. And I appreciate that greatly.
Charles, when we get to work early in the morning, will growl at people in the elevator on the way up to our office because he's a morning dog.
Very fair.
Literally. Yeah.
Anywho. Well, thank you everyone so much for joining us for this episode of The Responder Life with
Molly
and Victoria. We are so glad you joined us. I hope that each of you have a fantastic rest of your day, and that you can find us on social medias, whatever exists at the moment, and also on our website. And we're on basically all of your podcast listening apps of choice if you want to share this with somebody else. And yeah.
Have a great week.
We'll see you on the next disaster. Okay.
Bye.